In the early 1920s, a grocery chain was revolutionizing the American shopping experience. Their stores boasted a scientific new system that would drive out inefficiency and reduce costs. With the introduction of self-service shopping, its visionary founder, Clarence Saunders, had built Piggly Wiggly from a single store in Memphis, Tennessee, into one of America's fastest growing companies, and created the world's first supermarket. But in 1923, Piggly Wiggly's phenomenal growth was arrested when a shadowy group of financiers attacked the company's stock, driving down its price. With his hard-won fortune, an entire life's work suddenly vanishing before his eyes, Saunders had to act fast. He stuffed $1 million in his pockets and rushed aboard a train headed for New York. The self-made man's gut told him that if he stood any chance to survive, he would have to first recruit a master to teach him how to play this game. Because Clarence Saunders is about to attempt one of the wildest manipulations ever witnessed on Wall Street. And before he's through, his epic battle will nearly destroy the New York Stock Exchange. And drawing in some of the most famous names of the Roaring Twenties, its outcome will set the table for the American century and forever change the way we shop for food. This is Lodestar. Welcome to Lodestar, where we explore the non-trivial history of now. Clarence Saunders and the Piggly Wiggly Crisis. Part 1. The man who would be king. At the outset of the attack, Clarence Saunders did not know much about the game of high finance. He quit school at 14 to support his family of sharecroppers, working first in a sawmill and then in a hardscrabble general store in rural Tennessee. In the old days, grocery shopping involved long lines of customers waiting at service counters. Clerks would move at their own pace to gather up the goods, weighing and bagging every bag of flour or sugar according to customers' requests, then summing up the bills by hand and receiving payment or noting a customer's credit account before beginning the entire process again for the next customer in line. Prices were not marked and were often arbitrary, and customers could never be permitted beyond the counter to roam unattended among the merchandise. A shopper's experience was often slow and frustrating, just buying the daily necessities of life. But it's just how things were done. Saunders paid close attention to every detail that soured the shoppers' faces, always imagining how things ought to be. He moved to nearby Memphis, Tennessee, and worked his way up in the grocery business. Once in Memphis, he scraped up enough money to open his own store, proclaiming, "Never before since the Garden of Eden has it been so easy to get an affordable and healthy meal. It shall be said by all men, kindred and tongues, that the Piggly Wigglies shall multiply and replenish the earth with more and cleaner things to eat." And in 1916, Saunders bet it all, putting his ideas to work. As one entered the grand opening at that first Piggly Wiggly, amid the hustle and bustle of Main Street, they might be first struck by its size, which was no larger than a modern convenience store. Customers found themselves in a maze of zigzagging aisles, moving in one direction from entrance to exit, strolling freely among more than 1,000 goods to choose, a selection 4 times greater than common stores at that time. All items were clearly labeled with their prices, another innovation which Saunders had patented. Turnstiles prevented backtracking, and every item was pre-weighed and neatly packaged. He trained his employees to courteously guide customers through the new system and forbid them from doing the shopping for the customer. Taking a cue from Henry Ford, who 2 years earlier had stunned American industry with the $5 working day, Saunders paid out a portion of gross sales as weekly bonuses to his employees, on top of their salaries. The idea of direct profit sharing and performance-based pay empowered frontline workers, fueling the rise of America's middle class, but it alarmed many financial elites. Similar policies would be unheard of for most corporate retailers today. Customers were most surprised when they reached the register to settle their bill. The prices were lower than anyone could believe, made possible by the reduced operating costs from 15% to 4%. Then, clerks snapped off an itemized printed receipt, also patented by Clarence Saunders, and placed them in the shopper's hands. And then, they were quickly sent on their way, rushing back home to share all that they'd seen over a home-cooked meal. Saunders envisioned a no-frills shopping experience, predicting that his scientific focus on price and quality would win over the folks. Unlike most grocers at the time, his early stores did not take orders by phone for pickup or offer home delivery. One unhappy shopper protested. When she requested a clerk fetch her a pound of butter, he directed her to aisle 4. She refused to serve herself and marched up the street to a competitor's store. Saunders wrote of the incident that she had walked further, wasted more time, and ended up paying more for her butter. His reasoning seemed to win out. As incredulous competitors began to see their sales plummet, dozens of cheap copycat chains, such as the Hoggly Woggly, appeared on the scene, and Saunders promptly sued them all for copyright infringement. As Saunders rushed to open more stores, he was one of the first entrepreneurs to recognize that each new store that he opened seemed to increase sales of the existing stores, what would later become known as the chain store principle. Many old-school grocers went bust by refusing to change with the times, but others accepted Saunders' offer to become franchisees and quickly converted their operations over to the Piggly Wiggly system. Following this model, the company was able to expand rapidly and dominate local markets in price and service. Saunders had invented a better mousetrap, and the world was beginning to beat its path directly to his door. But his obsessive creativity didn't stop with stocking onions and tinkering with cash registers. Advertising. Saunders relished his growing public persona and promoted Piggly Wiggly with the zeal of a circus marshal. He wrote regular newspaper ads in a gonzo, stream-of-conscious style that demanded the reader's attention. His ears have been slashed, his toes cut off, his eyes punched out, his bones broken, his face smashed. A description of what has happened to the demon of high prices. The consumer, Saunders wrote, will henceforth from his throne at the Piggly Wiggly wield his scepter in the interests of his own stomach and his own pocketbook. These ads often ran with humorous cartoons that skewered local competitors or the events of the day. As Americans entered World War I, "Beware of the speculator," a headline railed against wartime hoarders who were trying to corner the market in sundry necessities of daily life and driving up the food prices. Seething contempt, he charged. "Such personages we do not need in our midst. To arms, ye free sons and daughters of liberty!" Anything Saunders could imagine to tickle his readers before hyping the newest prices and products on offer. As the company grew, it became the largest regular newspaper advertiser in the country, chewing up twice as many inches of print as the next biggest advertiser. And with more than 600 little piggies springing up across 40 states, in 6 short years, Saunders' silver tongue, loud mouth, and appetite for risk had grown his company into America's 3rd largest chain, launching him from obscurity and winning Saunders a fortune. The Pink Palace. Building on his public persona, Saunders began construction on an enormous Romanesque American mansion on a sprawling estate with a private 18-hole golf course, riding trails, a trap shooting field, and formal gardens. He planned a billiard room, indoor pool, and bowling alley for the basement. As evidenced by his innovative cash register, Saunders was fascinated with mechanical design. He closely followed cutting-edge introductions such as electrification, aviation, and refrigeration, and tried to incorporate them all into his plans. An avid fisherman, he even toyed with an idea of constructing an artificial trout run near his private lake, with underground pipes that could keep the water flowing ice cold under the sweltering Memphis sun. He personally oversaw every aspect of the design, ordering ornate pink Georgia marble for its construction. And as building began, people traveled from all around the South to marvel at Clarence Saunders' Pink Palace. A house, he proclaimed, he'd build to stand 1,000 years. And he had good reason to strut, because just as he broke ground, Piggly Wiggly's growth hit warp speed with an infusion of cash from its debut on the New York Stock Exchange in February of 1922. Analysts and insiders projected the company could grow to 8,000 stores in short order, and Saunders liked to brag at the time that Piggly Wiggly was the first and only stock he'd ever owned. As he spoke those words, the wolves smelled fresh meat venturing into their domain. As we'll see in this and future episodes, whenever any great innovation is born successfully into the wild and begins to grow, the existing order must be quick to either copy it, kill it, or ideally accomplish both, lest they themselves become the next meal. And now, back to the train. By late 1922, Saunders had hardly had a moment to enjoy his newfound fortune when he saw it start to vaporize. In its first 6 months of trading, the stock fell by nearly half of its value. What Saunders lacked in formal education, he made up through vigorous self-study of correspondence courses. How the stock market worked was a mystery, but, like the great poker players, he didn't focus as much on the cards as he did on trying to read his opponents. I like to watch the expression on a man's face when I say something unexpected that catches him off his guard. It is only by being able to startle a person that their true character is discovered. Saunders only knew that he was getting mauled by a gang of bears, and if he stood any chance, he'd have to improvise. But what he needed was an even sharper set of teeth and claws. To help him fight back, he had to recruit the most feared bear of all. He needed Jesse Livermore. Jesse Livermore was already a living legend and a household name in market-obsessed early 20s America. It was said that in the crash of 1907, he'd made a fortune by betting against the market, and only relented his merciless selling when a plea came on behalf of the man himself, J.P. Morgan, who practically begged him to stop for the good of the country. Born in 1877, Livermore was known for his remarkable ability to read the market trends and anticipate price movements. His uncanny insights earned him incredible fortunes and devastating losses, making him a respected and enigmatic figure on Wall Street. Luckily for Saunders, Livermore had no hand in the attack on Piggly Wiggly's stock, but its velocity had not escaped his attention.
I am attracted to whatever moves fast,
he quipped upon meeting Saunders in his secretive penthouse office overlooking downtown Manhattan. They say you're the biggest bear of all, Saunders challenged Livermore. Bulls make money, Mr. Saunders. Bears make money. And pigs get slaughtered, Livermore replied, unflinching. Saunders knew that he had found his man. But would he agree? After talking over the situation, Livermore agreed to conduct a quiet inquiry around the street. What he quickly recognized was a cherry opportunity had presented itself. and he began devising a plan. When Saunders returned 2 days later, Livermore agreed to join forces. This kind of operation requires great care, Livermore cautioned. But Saunders could hardly wait for him to finish. "How soon would you like to begin?" Livermore asked. "Now," said Saunders, standing up and opening his suitcase. He showered a pile of cash on the desk in front of Livermore. "There's $1 million right there! More than!" Saunders exclaimed. "And more where that came from!" The smooth operator was stunned. Saunders had been lugging this suitcase all around New York with him for 2 days. He must have choked back his surprise as he regained his composure. Livermore would have to master this reflex in the days ahead, operating alongside his erratic new acquaintance. With his war chest and general finally secure, Clarence Saunders then cried havoc and let slip the dogs of war. Please join us again for part 2 as their operation begins. Do you ever wonder who were the figures who brought us here? What pivotal forks along the path did they pick? And when did we recognize some of the wrong turns? Where did all those dead ends, detours, and roundabouts take us? How did we get here? Important lessons are lost when history becomes a sterile, compartmentalized study, or just another way of amusing ourselves to death. Lodestar
explores the greatest stories never told,
drilling deep into the non-trivial history of now. Thank you for joining us. Please leave a comment, question, or suggestion for future episodes. And please review us on whichever platform you get your podcasts. We appreciate the feedback as we get this thing rolling. Editor's note. We try to not editorialize as we recount events and let the story speak for itself. But we still want to include plenty of context about all of the surrounding events to show how the pieces fit into the bigger picture. And for reference, $1 million in 1923 would be worth more than $18 million in 2024 dollars. We will have an episode to reflect on the broader themes and the lasting impact of Clarence Saunders and the Wiggly crisis at the end of the series. Thank you.
There's a fruit store on our street. It's run by a Greek, and he keeps good things to eat, but you should hear him speak. When you ask him anything, why he never answers no. He just yeses you to death, and as he takes your dough, he tells you, yes, we have no bananas. We have no bananas today. We've string beans and onions, cabbages and scallions, and all kinds of fruit and say. We have an old-fashioned tomato, a Long Island potato, but